My grandparents' home is haunted. My grandparents' home has always been haunted, as far back as I can remember. Every animal in the house, to this day, refuses to enter the back bedrooms and the hallways. Even my giant mutt with separation anxiety. The feeling of unease and being watched is constant, to the point where many of my relatives refuse to use the bathroom in that part of the house. I used to sleep in the worst room of the house, the one that just emanated negativity and fear. I have many stories from growing up in that house, such as shower curtains being yanked, whispers and footsteps in the night, opening and closing doors. But recently, things have kicked up a notch. My grandmother asked me to make the entity leave, and I did try. Sage, incense, holy water, telling the entity to leave as it was unwelcome in the home. It did not work, but things did quieten down, until now. Though I've moved away, I still often visit, and I also paint. I'd spent months on a painting of lovebirds that my grandparents wanted to take and place in their home. I didn't think much of it, sure books and small knickknacks randomly fly off shelves, but a large painting would be fine, right? Wrong. This painting is nearly 4.5 feet long and 4 feet wide, and sat perfectly above their fireplace. As my grandparents are older, they'd not hung the painting due to being unable to use the ladders. So they leaned it against a wall, and it stayed that way for weeks. Recently, though, they found my painting thrown to the floor, face down, with punctures through the canvas, and the canvas frame, made of thick wood, was warped. The glass statues in front of the painting had also been knocked down, but were unscathed, and nothing was found that could have caused such damage to the painting. My grandfather, bless his kind heart, painstakingly tried to repair the canvas and minimise the damage, though the frame is still warped. The painting itself no longer has gaping holes as he pieced it back together and taped the back, even showing me his repairs that are far better than I could ever imagined. He's carefully propped the painting back up and placed heavier knickknacks in front of it. I'm still sad, though, about my work being damaged, and I suspect it's from the entity. We don't live in an area where seismic activity would have been a concern, and if it had been seismic activity, I would have assumed other precariously placed knickknacks would have fallen and been damaged. They have floor-to-ceiling bookshelves full of stuff in the same room. The mantel still had most of its small and fragile stuff untouched, and nothing else was out of place. I've told my grandparents that I'm not equipped to tackle this entity, and directed them to other resources. This thing has been a constant headache in that house since I was a baby, and I suspect it won't go anywhere else willingly, as it's made its annoyance at my removal attempt very clear. The ghost car. My husband and myself, now both retired, love to go on leisure drives. One cool but bright afternoon, we decided to go out around lunchtime. We don't like to use main highways, so mostly we use country lanes. So with my 2 daughters sitting in the back, off we went. We were driving along an old Roman road in our area at the back of Weston Park in Sheffield, and the road ran straight as a bullet in both directions, apart from the slight dips. We were the only car on the road. A large dark car coming after us really fast. I watched it rising up and down the dips in the road, and noticed my husband spot it in his mirror. I felt him adjust the car's speed and move over slightly to let him pass when he reached us. Then I noticed there was something weird about the shape of the car. To me, it looked like a very old Wolseley, with large round front bumpers, a car I had not seen on the road for decades. It came up right behind us, then moved at my view as if to overtake. My husband slowed right down and pulled to the side as far as he could to let him pass. Then I saw the car pulling alongside. The car came past where my daughters were sitting, then came level with my husband's window. I looked and saw what I thought to be an old man hunched over the wheel. Only one occupant, and the wheel was large, but I couldn't see a face. As it drew level, it suddenly vanished. I said to my husband, "Where did that go?" And he shouted, "Did you see that? Did you see that?" I thought I had imagined it. I said I'd been watching him come from about a good 1.5 miles back. When we asked our 2 daughters if they'd seen him, neither of them had. For a long time after, we told no one about this, thinking people would think us mad. It was a bright sunny afternoon at about 1 p.m. Was this a ghost? We can't explain it to this day. Can you? An old couple returns. To be honest, most of my life I've had luck, or bad luck, depending on how you view it, of being surrounded by paranormal activity. Only in the last few years have I started to really study the paranormal in depth, and I find that the more I learn, the more I want to dig deeper into it. The following is about one of those many experiences I've had. It was a large home. My 2 sisters and I were thrilled, as we could finally have our own rooms. Our parents seemed to have finally found a beautiful house. It seemed bright and cheerful, had almost an acre of land, and was just far enough from the city to be quiet. About a month after moving in, we would start to hear someone walking upstairs. At first we thought this was due to the house settling. After all, it was old. On occasion you would catch a flash of something darting from the corner of your eye, which looked like a dark shadow. Sometimes small, the size of a dog, other times a larger one. Our cat, called Shadow, would follow and would watch things that we couldn't see. My dad pretty much shrugged off all of it. My mum, sisters and myself found it exciting. We had, yet again, moved into a home with ghosts. As the first year progressed, so did the activity. One of my sisters had 2 big walk-in closets in her room, each having a light. And no matter how many times we closed the doors and turned the lights out, a few minutes later, when we checked, the lights were on and the doors were wide open. Off the living room were 2 other rooms. One was an extra bedroom, my parents', and the other was once a porch, now closed and with a small bathroom. Once in a while, you would be sitting in the living room or the dining room and hear the voice of what sounded like a man yelling, "Hey!" What I found curious was there was no bad feeling in our house. It was just like we were sharing a house with an invisible roommate. The man who owned the house came by one day to talk to my dad about something, and we asked him about the history of the house. We did not mention any of the activity that was happening. The original owners were an elderly couple. They'd lived in the house for decades, and the man died in the house. And since then the house had been on and off the market for years, and we had an idea why. Over the next few years we became used to the activity. My mother had one experience where she was in the kitchen and she happened to glance down the hallway to where the landing of the stairs were. For a moment a shadowy figure of a woman was standing there and slowly disappeared. Our cat had a hatred for the back bedroom off the closed-in porch. You couldn't drag him back there. All he would do would stand at a safe distance, hunching up and hissing. We also had 2 very entertaining occurrences happen. Once we were having dinner in the dining room and we kept hearing an odd noise. It sounded familiar, but we couldn't quite figure out what it was, so my younger sister and I went to see. When we got into the living room, we happened to look over by the entrance that led on to the hallway. Our phone, an old rotary, was dialing itself. We stood there speechless, then ran back and told everyone what it was. By this time, even my dad had experienced a few odd things, and he did not want to go and see that phone dial. The other occurrence happened one evening while we were all in the living room watching a movie. We had heard a few noises in the kitchen, but didn't think too much of them. By now we would chalk it up to the old woman, who seemed to be the practical joker of the ghosts. We then heard something and went into the kitchen. To this day I can't explain it. Something had locked the dishwasher and had started it. There had been no one in the kitchen, and the dishwasher door was slid over to the unlocked position. My mother did not sleep well that night. We ended up moving after living there for about 5 years, due to a job change from my dad. I found myself a bit sad that we wouldn't have our old couple to keep us company. I thought that maybe they could possibly follow us, as this had happened before, but they didn't. I guess they really loved their old home, and probably still do today.